The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991, in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 25B.
Of course, the chapel, that experience is great. We had a lieutenant for the Salvation Army, never had been married. She ran the home, and I loved her sin messages. They were great. I refused to go in one more time, so I had my baby first.
Anything to get out of chapel.
But as it was, I had not spoke to my mother since graduation night when she discovered I was pregnant when I was putting on my cap and gown. And so in October, when I had my daughter, I called her and I said, well, I just want you to know this is over with, I've got my daughter. And she said, so what are you going to do? And I said, I'm keeping her. And she brought me all the little diapers and the little T-shirts and stuff and said, this is real nice, where are you going to live? And I said, well, I guess back with Dad, The next day, the attorney was in there telling me, you can't do this. We have a family, a perfect family. They want this baby. On the day that we were supposed to be leaving the hospital, I had her ready to go home. My father came up and said, we've got to talk. We go back down for a 2-hour session with the social worker. You can't do this.
And you were dressed and ready to go home?
Oh, she was ready. I dressed her, we were ready.
You had been only there 10 days. I think it's real important, at least it is for me, to really figure out how, we're all strong women here. And it just boggles my mind that we got into this situation and couldn't get out of it, and couldn't do what we have now.
Yes.
I'll bet if you looked at yourself before you were strong, a lot of you.
I was a little whip shy thing.
But you're telling you were really rebellious.
I was always a strong person. And when it got right down to walking out the door with that baby, they're going, you have been bullheaded your whole life. Would you think of somebody else?
Why should this be any different?
And I think that what struck me in your book was that when the nun gave you that little lecture, I felt like I was listening to my social worker. I think they had a retreat one day, and then all those people got together and said, this is the script, because it was that. How could you tell a young woman, how could you make that, if you love your child? I remember being told I was so selfish because I wouldn't sign the papers.
Selfish was a very key word.
Selfish was the big thing, and you believed it because you say, oh gosh.
They must be better than me. They have a house and a car.
It was pregnancy thing was so bad because of the way everybody reacted to it. I must really be bad. I better listen this time.
I was told that, who would ever want to marry me if I was there?
Any one of my trials. Right.
They would have married me too?
They love birth mothers were loose.
But that whole stigma, you can't, who's going to marry you, who's going to, you're not going to be able to get a job because no one's going to respect you. I had like my whole future was going to be, I visioned myself in the gutter, living with a baby, saying I'm with my baby, holding my baby, and everything, but I will be living in like, I know visually I could see myself living in total poverty.
But there was no concept of our families helping us.
No.
Well, my mother said, you bring that Jap kid home, you're not going to live here.
Well, that's better than what my mother said.
Well, we'll get to that later.
Goddamn Jap is what she said. That was used a couple times.
I have another question too. This is something, here I wrote the book. I've talked about this all this time. I never put two and two together. When I was signing the papers, the same thing that you were talking about this time, and it was the first time I heard about a foster home.
That's the first time.
Oh.
And so I said to now I didn't make this connection because I wrote this in the book, but I missed the important point. And I wonder how many other people were affected this way. I said, I will not sign these papers if Jack, I didn't name him Jack, if my baby is to go to a foster home, I'm just not going to do it. I had always had this, they told me about this adopted family.
Right.
And now you're telling me he's going to a foster home? I am not signing. You give me 3 days to figure out how to get this, keep my child, but I want him, I couldn't stand for him to be in limbo for any more than that. And I would just do it whatever I could. So that's when I went home and told I should move to another state, and it would be fine, they would help me, but I had to move to another state. And then So I went back to school, and I'm back in school thinking, this is not it. This is not working. This is a lie. I knew it, like we all knew it. I mean, we were in horrible pain over this.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he was with the adoptive family.
Yeah.
And this is what I only got last week, was that if I had known he was in that foster home, I would have grabbed him.
But
I kept thinking he's in this adoptive family.
They lied to me. See, I
They
didn't
lied.
do that. What they did to me is they said, well, she'll be in a foster home for a couple weeks, basically to see if she's well.
Right.
And healthy.
Yeah.
That's not what they said to me. But then, when she was like, what, 8 weeks old or something, I wanted her back. That was it.
Mhm.
So I wrote and I said, well, and being the good 50s girl I was, I said, if you have a place here at home, I'd like my baby back.
That was good.
It's better than most of us.
Yeah.
I get a letter saying, oh, she's been placed. Well, then when I found her, she hadn't been. She was placed in a foster home. She was malnourished. She wasn't placed till she was 3 months old.
Oh,
Had
my
malnutrition,
God.
cradle cap, jaundice, all
Jaundice?
sorts of stuff. I'd never had a bath when my mother put me in the water when they brought me home. She said I screamed like a banshee, and I have 2 older brothers that are 7 and 9 years older, and she thought it had been so long since she had given a baby a bath that she'd burned me, but I just never been in water.
It was terrible. So but they got the state to, get after the foster family, but they lied to me. I wrote when she was 8 weeks old.
So they probably would have lied to me anyway.
Mhm.
All of us.
That was
It's
in
so
that
hard to
manual of
believe
the
that.
seminar they went to.
I know. Lie.
And how many of us were ever told that should there be something wrong with her, we'll be sure to give you a call?
Right, yeah.
Uh-huh, right, you know,
Oh, if something tragic should ever happen, the attorney would call me.
right.
Yeah, I found out through my son's adoptive mom that my son had a hernia. He was placed for 30 days in wherever they took him. It's
Babyland.
in limbo, which is
Babyland.
I can't think about that period of time. That's
Yeah.
something that I don't even want to think about it. But
Right.
anyway, he had a hernia right at the end of that 30 days, and the pediatrician with that agency took him to the pediatrician in Toledo and said, this baby has a hernia and this is your new son. So the pediatrician said, oh, I'm going to take good care of this boy. So he got him surgery, and the adoptive mom said, I marched right over there and got him. I mean, to think that my baby had this hernia and I wasn't there for him, and he was, and he was taken to his new father because he had a hernia. And it just, the whole thing, it's
Yeah.
just like a nightmare. That period of time, that limbo, is one of the hardest times I've had to deal with. What was happening? It wasn't, what kind of place, what nursery in the sky was he?
Well, it's hard on the adoptee too, because in fact, we were just talking about it last night. And of course, she had, I think you were there a week, and then I was placed in a foster home, and then I was adopted when I was 3 months. I mean, so I now know what happened, while I was growing and when I was born, and I know what happened when I was adopted. But that 3 months period, I probably
It was a
would never
void.
know. And you just don't have that completion of your life.
Have you gone back to the agency to try to fill that in?
I'd love it right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Some people can get there through hypnosis. You've ever tried that?
Katrina and I still ran
Mhm.
through her foster family.
I think that's an important part of our total healing. If this can be totally healed, and I really don't think it can. Don't try to tell me just because I found my daughter 4 years ago everything's fine. Don't tell me that, because adoption's like this scar that I have on my wrist. Not when I committed suicide, but when I had surgery. When it was first put in, or when the stitches were first there, it was very irritated. It was very red. Well, that has been 13 years ago. You can still see it now, but it's not quite as red. And I think if we think about this entire experience, whether you found or whether you're even thinking about searching or whatever, and all of this has come out, and I think Carol's book has particularly, brought so many of us out. And people are seeing her on TV, and she's talking about this. It's wonderful, So we're in our support groups. We're seeing a lot of people calling just because of that book. That book. Now it's called the book, The Other Mother. But I think if we look at this as something that we're not going to hide, it's going to be a part of us, for the rest of our lives, and we need to look at each part. And today we took a light and sometimes sort of a painful look at the experience, but now we faced it. And now it's time to probably go on and look at something else. Maybe this, for many of you, will bring up that foster care babyland limbo thing that we might be dealing with. I know that in Phoenix, we were never told that the kids were going to foster care. My daughter did not. She went from Flossie Crit's back room to the home. And when I found her, I felt good about that, because none of us wanted our kids out there in foster land. Because we know of kids who are stuck in foster care systems for years, and sometimes they're never adopted. But I think also we need to remember that whatever this is, like you said, this has made us stronger women, and it's made us stronger people. And tomorrow you can see the birth father panel and find out how they're healing. Do we have any more questions or comments?
Comment that I think that people are ready to hear our story. When I first went out with it in January, it was just published in January, it was a difficult time because the war had just started. It was terrible timing to be doing this. But in like 4 cases, I was the first subject that they covered since the war had started. That was pretty intense to shift gears like that. But still, it was almost like people were so in pain about the war that they could hear this. It's very interesting. And I have had nothing but compassion from people, and especially the media and the announcers, and they were remembering the girls that were sent off. I mean, they felt pain. That was part of if they didn't experience it, was part of their psyche that they were dealing with, in a way. And I've just been floored at the amount of healing I've gotten from the fact that people that haven't experienced it can understand the story. And I just want you to know that there's a lot of support out there. We go out thinking that we're still shunned in society. And our great healing will come when society says, we have compassion for what you went through. But they can't even do it if we don't speak out. And
Well, I think the younger generations are really, they're more understanding, because they don't even understand how it happened in the first place.
well, Jack's wife, Anna, and I had a heavy discussion. Yet she still doesn't understand how I did it. And, it's just almost impossible for her to comprehend.
I have friends who have found their daughters and say, well, why didn't you just have an abortion? It wasn't legal anyway, but it wasn't available. It wasn't available.
We have a question on the back.
I think the public perception is that they don't understand all the trauma that birth mothers went through to be told at all. They have no perception at all. And I think it's so important to present that story now when we're trying to open records and change the whole system of adoption. Because the perception that the public has is that, this is a nice, clean, antiseptic system that everyone comes out as winners, and they don't understand all these terrible things that went on.
And they're right, they can hear it.
And then when the stories are presented, that was an exception,
Right.
That was then.
See,
That's the thing I had. They
Mm-hmm.
think just because I just relinquished in 1980 doesn't mean that I didn't have any trauma with it.
Sure.
No, that's the thing that's really important too, is this open adoption business is, it's the same stuff we went through. It's probably worse.
It's just a different label to make it sound more
But some
progressive.
of these homes or some of these places now, we just had a girl in our group who went to a home in Santa Rosa and she signed her relinquished papers, and the next day she changed her mind. She got lawyers and everything. She couldn't get that baby back. It was legal the day after her birth.
It's the second you lift your pen off
Well,
that
that's the thing,
paper.
she was still had birth trauma. I mean, I can't believe things ever change.
Well, let me tell you a couple things that'll really shake you up. Last year in California alone, and I don't know, how many of you are California residents, but there were 4 adoptions overturned and the children returned to their birth mothers last year in Orange County alone. 4. They went to the appellate court level, which is a step above Superior Court where all of our adoptions are handled anyway. And these children ranged in anywhere from 16 to 20 months of age. In one court decision, I read the brief the judge's decision, and they said that they felt that the birth mother had been treated to the likes of Hester Prynne, and they felt that her wishes were never acknowledged, that her cries for help and to stop the adoption within 3 weeks of the birth were ignored by attorneys, doctors, social workers, everyone. Wait, I'm not
That's why we have
finished.
to talk. We have to
There's,
talk.
okay. Then there's another group, and one of the people that's spearheading this group of adoptive parents is traumatized by the return of her prospective adoptive son back to his birth mother. Is the group would like the time, and now legally in California you have 6 months to change your mind to void an adoption.
Independent.
Okay, I know who she is too. Okay, private adoptions. Okay, but there's another story. Okay, this group would like it cut down to 90 days, and really they would like it 3 days, and that's what they're really hoping for. They have a bill before the Senate, written by State Senator Burgeson's office, and they think this is just wonderful. And what they have done is they have lumped all of the folks who are hysterical about having their children through whatever means they got them, whether it was terminated rights or whatever, they're lumping us all together. They're saying because she signed a paper and she changes her mind 6 weeks later, she has no rights. Well, that's baloney. And I will do everything I can physically and emotionally in this state to fight that bill. But there's a lot of support for you for it because you see them crying on TV. I saw one of the returns on TV on the news one night. It was horrible. It was in a church. They had the prospective adoptive couple up here with the baby who was, she had to be like 18 months old. And they had the birth mother, okay, they were nicely dressed. Now, watch how this stuff's done. Don't get sucked into it. Watch how it's done. They were nicely dressed, you know, pants, and he had a tie and everything. The birth mother is standing at the back of the sanctuary in jeans, and a sweatshirt and a jean jacket, just waiting for when she could come in. She comes into the church. All their family and friends are here hysterical. They come in. They have to give the baby back. It's been done deal by the court. She walks out. The baby's crying. By the time the reporter gets to her, shoves the mic in her face and says, "Well, how does it feel?" That baby had stopped crying. And all the folks inside are hysterical. Then they go back in and say, "Well, what do you think?" "Well, we just really hope this is going to turn around and it's going to change." Nobody had talked to that 17-year-old birth mother. I will tell you to this day that you don't find an adoption counselor in this state that will say, "I want you to talk to a birth mother that gave up a child." You're not finding. That's right. And that's how we can stop this machine, because it is a machine. And we need to stop it. If a woman, in fact, and I use the word woman because that's what we all are no matter what age, if a woman, in fact, wants to give up or feels she has no option but to give it up for adoption, she has to have the best program possible. Exactly. But in this state as well, we are also seeing that the birth mothers have no rights afterwards. "Well, I'm sorry, but we're not comfortable with sending you pictures on a 6-month basis. I'm sorry, we do not wish further contact with you." There is a birth mother in Los Angeles who has filed suit against Holy Family Adoption Services for fraud. She said that they perpetuated the open adoption story. They met the prospective adoptive parents. They went to their house. Everybody was, happy-dappy. Well, now she wasn't getting the pictures. And they said, "Well, we're uncomfortable with that." And she said, "Well, I don't care if you're uncomfortable with it. That's what you promised me." And they said, "Well, we just can't talk about it." She calls the agency. She said, "Well, Holy Family, what are you going to do to help me?" And they said, "Well, that's really not our place." She said, "Wait a minute. I relinquished my child to you. You, in turn, gave them to these people. This is what we had agreed on before." "Well, I'm sorry. We just can't help you." She called an attorney. They're now in court in Los Angeles. Depositions will be taken this next week for the birth mother, the birth grandmother, everybody involved, including the nun who's the head of that particular agency.
But there probably were no papers.
Oh, there was a profile and all kinds of stuff. But there's nothing legally binding that agreement. But my basic premise on this whole thing is, if you met each other, what's the secret? Why can't you just do the pictures and stop it? Yes. It's honoring her as that child's mother.
But I still think that there's another thing with adoptive parents they need to do, especially if they have no children, they need to deal with that idea of infertility.
Yes, that's where it's at.
And that's where they get their anchors.
But that's not going to be our job to educate them about infertility. That's going to be the medical profession.
It has to be,
Yes.
it has to be within the system.
It's part and parcel. I agree with you. And I think the more that we step out, the more that we tell our stories, the more that we put ourselves in the newspaper, the more we speak out on radio, the more credence we're going to gain. And we're wonderful people. I've never been so enriched as I have by the women that I've met and the men through this movement. It has enriched my life. I feel that there's no accident that I've met any of you. I know I've met people I see once a year, and I feel like I just know you. You're just part of this family. And this sisterhood and brotherhood of this experience ties us together. And that's what's important, is if you see an inequity in Idaho, you put it out there to the network, and I'll bet you somebody will start writing some letters. And in California, I know it can happen. But we have to educate our legislators. We've got to keep our newspaper reporters informed and turn them around. If you see a great article on how wonderful open adoption is and you're going, wait a minute, call that person. They usually have a voicemail system. They would love to talk to a real life birth mother or a birth father or an adoptee who says, wait a minute, time out, this is not how it is. So don't be afraid to do it, because that's part of healing too. I never thought I'd be in the LA Times. I never thought I'd be in the Register. I never thought I'd make a video about all of the repercussions of giving up a child. I didn't think I had anything anybody wanted to hear. But once you start feeling a little better about yourself, you find it's real easy.
But see, we've got a lot to teach people. You know,
Yes.
Look at it. They said we'd forget, but we didn't. So what are we telling everybody about relationships with the kids that they have, or their, anybody? How we're all really connected with each other, and you can't just give birth, get rid of have the body apart from you, and that's it.
Right.
I think that's where people think the adoptive parents have the body, the physical body, and therefore they're going to have the greater loss. When we're all connected in spirit, and of course we have that loss.
Yes.
I just find it, talking about attitudes, I find it kind of ironic that all of you were told if you love your baby, you'll do the right thing, this is the best thing for you, and try to make you feel better about your decision. But yet, when you get out into society, people are like, well, you must have hated your baby, you must have hated being pregnant, you're a whole person. Why are you mourning over it now? Why 20 years later are you upset about this? It was your choice to give them up. You're just cold-hearted.
You just have to turn the page of that chapter. You know how many times I tried to turn the page? It didn't work. Diane.
How do we get to these new birth mothers before they relinquish?
That's going to be what I would really like to talk about this at length, and what I would like to do is kind of put some ideas for a family preservation program, so that it's mandated even by the state that every woman who is unmarried or whatever, or through every attorney or Department of Social Services social worker, has to give this person this packet of information, period.
Because there's an incident in San Diego which I'm real involved in. It was a private adoption. The girl threatened to take the baby back. They did pick up the baby actually for a night. And as soon as that happened, they finalized the adoption. They cut off all her support that they had promised her for 6 months counseling and so forth. Everything turned, changed, and told her she couldn't.
Really?
Yeah. She was a queen in their eyes
Until she had the baby.
So they got what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nothing's changed.
I just feel they need their own legal representation.
What you're going to have to do also is find out who those attorneys are in your area who know the subject. Just because somebody's a family law attorney in California doesn't mean they know diddly, about adoption. You need to find somebody who specializes in adoption. And then you need to find out those who specialize in not just placement, but how about disruptions? Because there are many attorneys that would represent a adoptive parent in a disruption who would never represent a birth parent.
Well, this attorney does specialize
Good.
in adoption.
One of the things about this.
Represent both parties, though.
Yeah, she's
Well,
that's
represent both parties. What do you think they're going to have loyalty?
I asked a woman adoption attorney who's an adoptive mom about that. I went to an ours and adoption meeting. I jumped right into the enemy of the camp, and I've just written a letter to the editor with my name on it about the woman who was speaking, and it was really interesting. But anyway, I asked her about that, and she said, well, it doesn't matter because the social worker represents the woman.
Yeah.
That's not illegal. A social worker is not an attorney. It's
No.
not the same thing. But
No.
you're so glib about it. Oh, well, it's like,
There is legislation pending in California, hopefully this legislative session, where the birth mother would have to be represented by separate counsel.
Good, that's really,
But you know, you've got to also realize, it's good you went to ours, because we have to also infiltrate.
What is
Like,
ours?
I don't know what it stands for, because they don't either. It's an adopted parents group. They came up with ours as they thought that was a cute name, and it means something, but they don't know anymore.
Ownership.
But
Ownership.
The thing is that they have seminars just like we're sitting at this week. And some of the workshops in their seminars are how to find a baby, you know, dial 1-800-BY-BABY, you know, that's B-Y-E baby, or
Seems to me
B-U-Y
there's
baby.
an awful lot of literature like that floating around.
There is an
here right
awful
now.
lot out there,
but
and I
you
find
need,
it
you do
very
need to go to
offensive.
the sessions and things, you do
Right,
really
but
do.
you have to go to the adopted parents
Parents
groups.
to
There are
find out.
classes, there are books, there are everything that are saying, how do you get the baby, get the birth mother to like you.
Market
and
yourself.
The minute you get that baby in your home, you buy volume 2, and it tells you if she changes her mind, how can you fight the system, how to get the lawyer, what to have the lawyer do, yeah, right.
resume, I just got the mail for Wednesday.
How to write a resume, how to put the ad in the thing. AT&T came out with this new thing. You too can have an 800 number. Have you read the paper lately? In the personal? In the USA Today that they put in on the floor, you know, out here, there's an ad in there, a 1-800 number, you know, for this and that and the other. The phone books now. The adoptive parents have just as much things going on as we're trying to combat what's happening and educate and have reform. They are equally, if not more, involved in how to perpetuate this adoption
We have to
system.
fight them, but the ones we have to get to are the birth mothers.
Exactly.
We have to keep them from
them
giving them
speaking
their
out,
babies.
but at the
That's
same
it.
time, don't ignore the enemy in the sense
Oh,
of,
no,
I
you
hate
can't
to
do
say
that
the word
either.
enemy because it's a bad word.
Right.
And everything, but you know that they are going on the other side of saying that we are the minority, and we've got to get all the birth mothers out speaking, all the adoptees
Are you
too.
saying the consensus is, though, I mean, I can understand that, and is it that all adoption is terrible?
No, there will always be room for adoption, and adoption has always been here. And there are situations where it is the only and right and best decision for a family. But
The family
the family should be kept together
Yeah,
as the first and foremost
There's a real problem
priority.
with that in the 90s, because we're so mobile, we're not that small knit
Nucleus.
family organization that we used to be, and that's real hard now. I mean, my whole family's in Seattle, and that's real fun, kind of thing. But we're so spread out, and we make our lives that way. That's what we do.
And that's the thing of the 90s, and maybe by the year 2000 we'll change around and we'll all start becoming rural.
I need to wrap this up for this purpose, but I want to thank you. I'll keep going. I want to thank you for coming today. I want you to think about what we said and go back to your groups and think about the next couple of days, because I'm sure we'll all be here till Sunday. If you want to talk about this further, we can either get a gab session going together and let's exchange some ideas. I'd like to see us each go back to our groups and say, wait a minute, we really found something we can empower ourselves with. Because as an AAC affiliate, and hopefully you're all AAC members, we will have some directives coming out about what you could do in your area and the family preservation program that we want to put together, and I think it's going to be real important. Don't forget, when we want things to come out to birth mothers mandated by the state, there is a cost involved. And the state of California, if many of you know, is just budgetary crazy. So we have to keep things down to a very low cost, and we administration and all that, and we're going to have to think of a way to do it. Whether we donate the information to the state or what, I don't know. But think about how we could get even a preservation of family packet to a young girl so that she could make a clear decision or reach out for help, and somebody say, that's okay, you come stay with me, I've got a big house, no problem. So think about what we can do in our areas, and at our regional meeting. Maybe we could talk about that later today. But I know we have the power within our groups. I know it, because legislators are very interested in what their constituents have to say and their concerns. And they count the number of letters. They don't care if they're typewritten or written or handwritten. So anyways, think about this, and let's talk about it at the regional meeting later or later on this weekend, because I think we've really got some good thoughts.
20-some years ago, when you were being oppressed, did you ever believe it would be here someday?
No.
That's what's so
No.
wonderful about this.
And thank you all for coming. This has been great. Hi.
This concludes this session. The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 25A.
Hey, all you lovelies. Welcome to our first run-through of the maternity home tour. Unfortunately, our slide presentation was confiscated by the National Committee Photoshop, so they were destroyed. Those of you who don't know about the National Committee, I'm sure they would love to see the end of any of this reform and frivolity about maternity homes.
Oh, so you're not going to show a picture of where I was born?
I'm sorry. We could.
Slept last
No,
night.
she dreamt all night that we'd show the.
Where were you born? Florence Crittenden here anyway.
Oh, don't.
Have you been to
We
it?
had
Did
that.
you visit it?
Huh?
You should visit it.
We'll talk about this later.
Do you have pictures of just various maternities,
Yes, we have literature that we've collected from various ones.
like Oklahoma City?
No, that was coming and didn't make it.
We had a logistic problem with the slideshow. We had photo albums that were coming in from people who've done histories of homes because they were there.
Yeah, and so forth, and none of them arrived, so.
So you have, we could do a meditation if you like. I'll lead you through a meditation of visualization. If you want to go back to me.
How, I would like to take a brief, just a little brief intro. I'm Cindy Shacklet, and I was the resident of the Florence Crittenden home in Phoenix, which is still standing. Curry,
Oh, Bruce Memorial, Los Angeles.
1965 and
66.
respectively. How many in this room, and I think I know, are birth mothers? How many are adoptees?
Wait a minute, I have to count.
No, wait.
Let's count.
How many birth
1,
mothers?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
How many adoptees? 3.
This is not going to work. That should work too much.
Can you hold with your left and right with your, okay.
Have adoptees, one,
A's,
3.
3, okay.
Anything else?
No, that's,
Anything else?
well, you could be a social worker.
See, there's another one. She might be one of those others.
Hi, come on in. And I would also like to introduce you to our special friend and guest, and I think a person that has, if there's anyone who has put down what it was like on paper and signed her name to it, it's this lady right here, and it's Carol Schaefer, author of The Other Mother. And if you haven't read it, see, if you haven't read it, please stop by the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please stop by the first floor book room, and Carol will autograph your purchased book. Now, I sent one off to a young lady in Arizona that I left there 25 years ago, but she hasn't had time to read it.
I sent mine off to my daughter who's born in Los Angeles nearly 25 years ago, and I haven't heard from her since.
Okay, to talk about
Business Valentine's Day.
to talk about maternity homes, I think we have to look back and see what their original intention was. And in the research that I did, I found that maternity homes were originally shelters for women who were less economically advantaged, not specifically for adoption relinquishment purposes. They were a housing unit. Some were all-encompassing and acted as the agency as well. It was one facility. Others were just the home itself where you stayed, but the agency was elsewhere. So there are many types of what we would call maternity homes. One of the oldest is the Willows in Kansas City, Missouri. And I would like to read just something what it said here. The Willows was the most important source of adoptees, got that? In Kansas City, and attracted unwed mothers from a large region. The Willows Maternity Sanitarium was on Main Street, established in 1905. Now, the packet that I had coming from Missouri included a suicide pamphlet. We're not sure if this was for the social workers or who, but it was very interesting how the Willows has perpetuated this, and the Willows always maintained that they had only the best babies. Well, have you ever seen a bad baby? I mean, really. So anyway, in 1958, the same name and address, and they had 60 beds, a seclusion maternity sanitarium operated exclusively for the care and protection of the better class of unmarried young women. That's where they got the better babies. Okay. Babies arrive via Dr. Stork's special. A train.
We're BCBM then. I'm sorry.
And all adoptions through the juvenile court. In 1957, the superintendent was also known as Garnet M. Haworth. The Willows Maternity Sanitarium was owned by Mrs. Haworth and had 75 beds and 75 bassinets. So this was one of those all-encompassing facilities where the babies were.
Do you realize if you had twins, one who had to, just kind of hang
That would take 2 beds. Okay, they had 155 births in 1935 and was still referred to as a sanitarium, which means, to me, in my typical cultural messages, there's something a little off upstairs. So, okay, see, here's the selected case history. A natural mother is how this adoptee refers in this book. A natural mother gave birth here in 1955. Her baby was baptized even, that's probably why they became even better, by a Lutheran minister, and it was adopted via the juvenile court. A natural mother gave birth here in 1947 and considers the Willows to be the adoption agency. She said it was owned by Don Haworth and that the building was demolished in the mid-70s, probably by a bunch of angry birth mothers. There you go. In 1935, an adoptee was born and was delivered by Dr. Van Gel and does not know of any adoption agency involvement. In this case, the adopted parents came from Holland. Again, getting back to that Tennessee Children's Home attitude where it didn't matter where the kids went. They were just all over. Holland, and the adoption was finalized in the juvenile division in Kansas City. This adoptee learned that the first name of the natural mother from a lab report issued by Dr. Stewart. He was born. He has that the blood test report is stated 3 1/4 months prior to birth. I don't know how you would do a blood test prior to your birth. In this case, this man was. He would. Let's see. Many adoptees inherit little birth announcements issued by the Willows via Dr. Stork Special. So that's essentially the old style mansion that has now been converted to the One Mother's Home. My facility in Phoenix was actually on a corner surrounded by, it had to be 8-foot barbed wire, but I'm short, and it could have been 6 and looked bigger, And you couldn't visibly see the facility from the street. You couldn't see the actual building unless you were standing at the gate, and then you could see the actual building. But the hedges were manicured to keep us in or them out, I'm not sure. Anyway, I'd like to take just a quick survey of who was in a maternity home and not who. Which end of the United States were you in? The middle line represents Texas and north. And I'd like the name of the home. And if we have duplicate names, then we'll just, not do that. Okay. Okay, so should we start out with Florence Crittenden? Okay. Florence Crittenden in Phoenix. West. Denver. Florence Crittenden? Okay.
Florence Crittenden, Washington.
Barbara?
Toledo, Ohio.
Okay, so you're east, okay. So Denver, Phoenix, Arizona.
And what was Toledo?
Toledo. Massachusetts? Did I hear that?
Yeah.
Patty? Oh, well. Yeah, St. Anne. No. We're just doing all the Flossie Crit locations right now. Because Flossie Crit seemed to be one of those franchise deals, where there were, every state had about 4. I know in California there were 3. There was one in Los Angeles County, there was one in Orange County, which is now closed, where we are now, and there's one in San Francisco. Okay. Any other Florence Crittenden locations we didn't cover? Okay, next one is St. Anne's Maternity in Los Angeles.
Which is expanding.
Oh, yes, and their building fund is going great because Loretta Young keeps donating. St. Anne's in LA, any other in the West that we might have forgotten? Curry? Booth Memorial. Another Boother? And where was you? Booth in Idaho. Okay.
Big Sister League.
Big Sister League. I saw that Pam Dauber's a spokesperson for them now. Did you know that? No, she is. Anyway. Yeah. Okay, Big Sister League. Okay, how about the East?
Well,
I went to Seton House, but I don't think that was a chain.
No. No. You don't have to be a chain.
Oh, okay. That was in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay. Any place? Go ahead.
I don't know the name of mine, but it was a Catholic maternity home in Oklahoma City, but it was really Bethany.
Oh, okay. So Bethany. Isn't it Deaconess now? What's the name of it?
All I remember was Monsignor Eisenbart had
Oh,
his
Ben.
house behind. He watched over us. You wouldn't forget her name like that. Did you want to give the name? I like it the same.
What city?
Well, Oklahoma City,
Okay.
but it might have been Bethany.
Well, we'll try. They don't even have that. Well, there's one he missed. But what do we expect from a man?
The rest of the homes, you know. What is this book?
This book is probably the greatest wealth of information. This is called, ready for this title? Adoption Agencies, Orphanage and Maternity Homes. Written by an adoptee, written by Reg Niles. Actually, it's not a book, it's a directory.
I'd like to...
He privately published it, and I understand there are no more copies. So what I'm trying to do is trying to scout up any extras, and perhaps through our newsletter, the AAC newsletter, if we'd like to purchase them and then sell them and give the AAC a little profit of $2 to $5, I think that'd be neat. This is invaluable, particularly in search. When I'm trying to help somebody and they say, well, I was born in LA and I know the address, but I don't know the facility. Well, so many things 40 and 50 years ago in Los Angeles have changed, so that building may not be there, but the address is. And that's what's important. And it gives a little brief history of if you were born if your birth mother was at St. Anne's, she probably delivered at the same facility. After such and such a date, she went to, Queen of Angels Hospital. So that gives sort of a pattern as to where babies were born and how this whole thing evolved. Was there a question over here?
Yeah. I'm an adoptee. I think I was born in Women's Hospital in New York City, in Manhattan.
Oh,
I was born there, but I don't know. I don't think that was a
maternity home? Probably it wasn't.
Okay,
But what we can do is look in here under the hospital, and it'll backtrack to where the girls were staying, if it was a maternity home in New York. See, it sort of works both ways.
It could be several homes fed into one hospital.
Yeah, that was my question.
Can I use it again?
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
And that's why you're here today.
Okay. All right. Is there any place you might have forgotten? Anybody born at any place, or whatever? And so you were born at the facility. Okay.
Yes, and according to my mother, she had to stay there. Whether she was going to relinquish or not, she had to stay there with the baby.
And take care of you. Yes.
And take care of it.
And you are, pardon me for asking, but we're all sisters and all this. How old are you?
I'm 44.
So you were born in 1940.
47.
And prior to that, I know back east there was a boarding, I want to say attitude or boarding policy to where the baby stayed in the room and the mother nursed the child.
They did that at St. Anne's in the 40s. I didn't
It also
find
cut
that
down
out.
on the staff, because then, you take care of your own kids, you don't have to have people in there. The nursery didn't have any.
Oh, they wouldn't even let me see.
Oh, I know. We're going to get into that later. Okay.
We'll get into all of
Let's
that.
go. Let's move on because we don't want to miss a point, I'm sure. Okay. Let's see. All right. Anybody else we've forgotten, or did anyone here not go to a maternity home? Was anyone staying with a relative and wish they had gone to a maternity home?
Because we will allow you to join the sorority.
Yes. We are now forming an international.
We're going to have cards eventually.
Sure, you like the food. Judy was a maternity home dropout. We will get into scholarships and graduations later. Okay. All right. Excuse me?
Ballroom 6.
This is it.
Are you
Maternity
okay with
homes?
Yeah. We're right here.
We're dancing.
And which maternity home did you visit or born into? Or
I was in Rosalia Manor in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Rosalia Manor. Sounds like
I was
a...
there twice. I have 2 children.
Okay. Now, do I dare ask who we're going to try to get a years of spectrum here? My child was born in 1965. Is there anyone whose child was born prior to that?
64.
Anybody prior to 64? Judy? 60? 62. 60 is our You win the prize. Okay. And the most recent is 1980. So we have 20 years of experience in this room in the same.
Someone said 53, didn't they?
63. Don't make it worse. Okay. There were a couple questions we'd like to throw out to you also. How did you find out about the maternity home facility? All right. How many found out through a doctor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of us.
I guess you could include me. My father asked the company doctor at work, and he told me.
Oh,
So
well,
We're going to put 4 or 5.
no anonymity there.
No.
Okay. How many found out through a lawyer? Social worker? 2 for a social worker?
I can't write. I left my eyes at home with the kids, you know, the ones that go back there. So attorneys, were there any?
3.
3, okay. And
Social worker? 2. Just SW.
Right.
Okay, okay. Agency.
Well, social workers do.
Okay, all right. Well, there are psychiatric social workers, and then, you know. Okay. Any other way you found out about it? Barbara?
My sister.
Okay, from family.
The biologic dad.
Oh, the birth father. That's interesting.
It's called BBF, I abbreviate.
It was, we were going to get married, but then he said, you know what, I talked to a priest and I found out about this. And that's how I found out, through the birth father.
A friend.
And of course, my mother.
Now, how did she know?
Because I
As you were adopted.
Yes,
And
I
it-
was raised by my mother, my birth mother.
Oh, you were raised by your birth mother? Oh.
So,
She wasn't a birth mother.
Then she's not a birth
No,
mother.
that's a birth mother.
She's your mom.
yeah, she's mom.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's...
If you
Okay.
sign surrender papers, you then become a birth mother. Prior to that, you are a mother.
All the semantics. Okay. I want to zoom on because I want Carol to share her story. How many... Hello. Hello. Let's see. How many of you left your home state of residence and went somewhere else? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Same state that I went.
7. Well, how far? If you went from LA to Orange County.
60 miles.
No. We want you to leave the state line. Okay, how many? 6 of us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. What were the excuses used for leaving? I mean, what did you tell the rest of the folks about why you were leaving? My story was I was going to Arizona State University. Nobody even knew I applied, but I was going. Boy, was I going. Okay.
I was going away to a boarding school because I was lucky.
A boarding school because she was lucky. Barb?
I was going to a stuttering camp.
A stuttering camp? That's a long camp.
Yeah, because it was, I was a speech therapist, and,
Oh.
But I won't go down to
No.
Well, that would have been a lot more fun. No, that's a tea. But, yeah, I was, I've been a therapist at it the summer before, and we made up a story because my best friend was getting married, and I couldn't be there because I wrote a show. So it was, I had to go to pre-training.
I see.
Because why would Barbara have to go to a camp like in May? Well, she has to.
Stutter.
pre-train.
No. Okay.
So my school was told that my parents were separating and I went to live with my mother in Los Angeles.
Okay, going to live elsewhere. Okay.
I was told when I was in my 20s, and I said, well, I'm just going, I need to have a mentor and get out of California.
You're moving out of town. Okay. Just moving away from home. Okay. Judy?
I went to well, actually, I did study with a friend for a while before I went.
You're just visiting a friend. Okay.
I was supposed to be working there.
Okay.
I got married.
Who got married? Oh, did you really die? Okay. At what month in the pregnancy did you enter the home?
3rd.
Ooh. Anybody earlier?
Oh,
6.
Oh, 6. Okay. That's the usual.
4.
4th month. Boy, I really stretched it. Okay. And how soon after you entered did you show?
I showed when I went in.
You were visibly
4
pregnant.
months and you showed?
Whoa. I think the next day I showed.
The next morning I woke up and found out there was a baby in there. There was not a baby in there the day before. I was a size 6. you know. When it came out next morning, took a shower, I was like a size 12. Holy shit. Been that way
Okay.
ever since.
Moving on with our, as we go in the door of the home part here. Any losses of identity? Okay. How many were able to use your own first name? Oh, okay, that's almost a majority. Okay. How many were assigned another name?
Oh, another last name.
Another first or last name? Another last name.
It was a name, a full fictitious name.
So you were Sherry. Oh, really?
My maiden name was Thomas. My papers say T-E-E. I figured if they're going to change it, they're going to make it as short as possible.
That's interesting. So there was a loss of identity imposed upon you.
They tell you to take the same last initial.
Initial,
And
right.
give it.
In FCH, they did.
Okay, so it wasn't a full name. That's why I was asking, because Booth also makes you take the last initial. As opposed to, there's some gals, I don't remember, I wish I could remember where they went, but they actually had a name given to them. Like, your last name was Thomas, and so they're going to say, well, that's close to Smith. So you're going to be Sherry Smith. You know, or they just say, well, your name is going to be Harris.
We had no last name.
Right.
And St. Anne's, it was just the last initial, first name, last initial. Right.
When I went into Booth Memorial, there was already another girl by my first name of Kathy, even though now I go by Curry. And so they said, well, we already have a Kathy C. So we have to pick another name. And I'm sitting there next to my mother, who, was just fit to be tied about this whole thing. And so I just can't imagine, Betty. Anyway, so I just thought, she said, well, could you pick it? Let's have your middle name. And I said, well, it's also C. My parents were C. I thought they were cute. And so they said, well, you just need to pick another initial. And of course, I was madly in love with the birth father, so I just chose his last initial. And I said, how about H? And my mother just, she had to call and say she was Kathy H for 4 months. But she had to pick. Cindy said you had Patty 1, Patty 2, Patty 3.
Oh, yeah, we had 4 Patties at a time. And then Patty 1, Patty 2, Patty 3, Patty 4.
Many duplications of names, so I had to go, someone had my name, Joy, so I had to go by my other name, which was Mary, because they had no...
It must have been a real confusing time. I mean, who do you answer for? Okay. Ages of the
Did you want another
Inman.
example of the loss of identity? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the thing that I vivid in my memory is the black magic marker that she took the mail and she blacked out your last name and then the return address before you got your mail.
Before you even got it. That's a good point.
I couldn't
Remember whether she covered up with her thumb when she handed it over?
I guess,
There was always that covering up of the...
I think you probably got more mail than I did. I'm serious. I could probably count on one hand the pieces of mail I received in 5 months. Okay, that's an interesting one. Okay, any work assignments? Oh wait, I'm sorry. Wait. We need to go back. Ages of the other residents in the home.
And yourself.
In Phoenix, at the time in 1965, between September and December, they ranged in age from 14 to 30. And we found out as time went on, close to the delivery, I think post-delivery, that the 30-year-old was actually married and had come in to have the baby under the auspices of giving it up, but had no intention to do so. They were economically deprived, but this was her story to get in and get taken care of. So 14 to 30 in 1965 were in this home. We had blacks, we had Hispanics, we had American Indians, and of course, everybody from all over the United States. Every state almost seemed to be represented. Yeah. Well, it was a nice vacation. I'd never been to Arizona. Anyway, okay, any work assignments at the home?
Did you want to know other ages?
Anybody have any other ages from 14 to 30 at the home?
How old was how everyone was when they were in there?
Okay.
17.
Well, why don't we do this in an orderly manner? Why don't we start here with Patty and go, and then we'll just wind on back. Okay, Patty?
Say how old you were.
How old you were? 17? 16, 18?
15, 16, 23, 20, 18, 21, 25.
But there was a 12-year-old.
12. Anybody else back there? They're just visiting. Okay. I was 18 when I entered the home. I celebrated my 19th birthday at the home. How old were you? 19?
I turned 18.
I had my son on my 21st birthday.
Ooh, and you didn't forget either, did you? Okay, any work assignments at the home? I worked in the medical lab and I tested the urine every Monday morning. I had no medical background, and God, ooh. And those little bottles, remember the little bottles you got on Sunday when you came down the lab? Or, you know, and that was me the next morning going, ew. I could have worked in the laundry, but whatever. What was your assignment, if any?
Well, I buffed the floors in this hall for one.
Oh, but floor buffing, yes.
That's how, if I ever hear from anybody from the book, you know, because of the book, they'll say, I know who she is. Because of that obsessive floor buffer. And then, because I did such a good job, I got to clean the chapel and set up the altar for Mass on Sunday.
Of course you did.
Homes, if that's what you're looking for. Yeah.
Hi, Sue. Okay, Curry, did you have a special assignment?
When I first got there, my first assignment was heavy pots and pans in the kitchen, because when you didn't show, they put you in there, because the sinks were those ones that when you bend down, the bottom of the sink is like at your knees, you know?
Or below.
Really deep, and those big oatmeal pots are about this big, and heavy as the son of a gun. And so you can't do that when you're 9 months along, because your stomach won't allow you to get close enough to the sink to reach the bottom of it.
Do you want to write down some assignments like lab or, okay, and floor buffing?
I had whiplash, and my doctor from home had to write me a note that I didn't have to do that anymore because I was in extreme pain doing that job. That I then got the chapel.
Aren't we in a selective?
I know, and I took great pride in the way my chapel looked. I mean, it was really, I was kind of, if I could buff it, I would. I'm done.
I cleaned the tables in the cafeteria.
Okay. Okay. Oh. Just doing general housekeeping.
I helped the nuns fix the food.
The nun, there was one cooking? That was it? We had, okay.
Well, we had a variety of jobs. It depended upon where you were in your pregnancy. You know,
Oh.
pots and pans to wiping tables or whatever. Cleaning classrooms.
Our jobs rotated, but the most vivid memory is the laundry, because bless my mom, she saved all my letters that I wrote to her, but I remember in one saying from 9 to 3 all day in the laundry, doing all the sheets and towels and everything, and then I was elected House President, so I got to sign all the chores. Thank you very much. Wow. Boy, my special. Boy.
You were a mover and shaker back then, Barb.
This was really something. I was the oldest one there, so.
Maybe that had something to do with it. Diane?
That's a compliment.
Just a variety of jobs, housekeeping to, okay.
Yeah, we did the rotating one too. The general maid would assign you a duty each week.
Okay.
You swept the floor.
Well, I went in my 9th month, and I was only there for like 10 days.
What a smart woman. All right.
I was a rebel all the way through pregnancy.
Good.
Never left town, went to fair, you know.
Oh, that's right.
Explode. Oh, you bet. And they wanted me to go to California to visit my aunt. And I said, no. Yeah. But my father was going to be out of town, so he had to find arrangements for me in case I had my baby, which I did. And I had to go to Booth. So I got in on the last, but because of my age, I got to do the dishes.
Boy, are you lucky.
Loved it.
Mm.
I don't remember.
Okay. Judy?
They have varied jobs. I think I only worked in the kitchen at the table when I left.
You were such a rebel.
We had kind of like the book, we put in work homes until the last month, which was then with it. So I was in a work home, which was
A wage home.
a wage home, which was wonderful. The one I was in, this I was really like.
Yeah.
Some people had horrible experience.
Yeah.
And then the last month, we kind of rotated through jobs that I was there.
Okay.
I want to mention something too that I heard that was a horror at a booth. This happened. There was an assignment for some women to clean the labor room after the deliveries.
I've heard that.
I mean, that is to me, and I talked to a woman in San Francisco who had done that. She said, "Oh, that was the greatest job I wanted to have. I wanted to be near the mothers and the babies." Oh my God! And she didn't even. She never connected what she was saying.
No.
It was incredible, but that's got to be a total abuse.
The women over 18 were the ones who worked on the hospital floor. They were only assigned there. The hospital was on the 2nd floor. The reason being that if you were over 18, you lived outside the residence. They had a house on the corner. And that was to keep the ones over 18 away from the others living in the home to talk about what was happening in the delivery room, the labor room, etc., in the nursery, etc. I mean, the babies didn't exist at St. Anne. They were in
Not
the
doing.
Yes.
See, now Booth, they had a residency house in the back for the older girls. Well, I mean, they were big older. They were 3 years older than I was.
Yeah.
21. And that they worked, the girls that wanted to continue working and still had a life, and we were not allowed to even talk to them, and they sat in the dining hall in a separate table. And it was like, you know, our brains would be contaminated or something if we spoke to them. We couldn't even smile at them.
That's it. They weren't allowed to talk to them.
What occupied your time?
School.
School?
I had to go to school.
Okay, school. You were continuing your high school education? Okay, so you're continuing your education?
Correspondence.
Correspondence.
No, high school course.
Oh, high school correspondence school, okay.
They had high school, so-called campus, down in the boiler room.
Did anyone graduate from their maternity home from high school?
At Booth in LA, you could.
I went to graduate. I mean, they had caps and gowns. You've never seen anything so funny. She's wearing it, but I talked to her.
We had the auxiliary come in, the ladies' auxiliary come in once a week. We did crafts. I don't think I have a craft left that I did. I think I dumped it.
We did crafts also.
Crafts?
I have,
You have more pink octopuses or something?
I remember last time I
it's
made a
just
pink octopus.
being housed and not doing anything that even remotely related to babies. I think that was my most vivid impression is that it was just a foregone conclusion. There was nothing that even related to children
Or family.
Or family, or parenting.
We played cards a lot.
Yeah, password. I bought a password game one time.
And TV.
Watched it lots.
Slept a lot.
And our booth.
You were allowed to sleep during the day?
Oh. Oh, we were.
Yeah.
At Booth in Boise, because of my age, and I was already out of high school when I went in, there were 2 other girls my age and 1 older, I guess. They didn't want us talking to the girls that were still attending school. But we had to sleep with these kids anyway, and some of them still went to bed, I think. But on a daily basis, the older girls, after we got our chores done, we would sign out of the home, and we didn't have to come back until 5 at dinner.
So this was after your lunch?
No, after breakfast.
Oh, after
They wanted us
breakfast.
out of there.
We weren't allowed to
Oh.
leave till after lunch.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, actually, they didn't really want me there, because I had a really big mouth.
You had a really big. And you went to the fair?
I went everywhere.
Yeah,
But
okay.
my home was only 2 blocks away from here.
Oh, jeez.
And so I would sign out and go to my friend's house for the day, and then I'd come back in time to check in for dinner. And trying to think,
Why don't you stay with your friend?
well, she was a married woman, my father didn't think she knew how to take care of me if I went into labor. I don't know.
Well,
But as far as crafts, I think we all learned how to knit.
Yeah.
I mean, I
crochet.
had the greatest pink slippers that hurt my feet. And I mean, that was only 10 days. I mean, if I'd been there for 9 months or whatever, I could have learned how to make a
Oh,
blanket.
the slippers were made by the end of your first afternoon.
Oh, no, I'm left-handed, it took longer to
Oh,
do.
so,
Everyone was knitting at St. Anne.
yeah.
so we had left-handed knitting and password,
Sort of a bazaar that we were making things for.
a bazaar,
And I remember the bazaar. and
sort of a
in fact-
fundraiser for the home.
Yeah.
Ah.
My mother came in, and in fact, at Christmas time, I saw it, and I haven't seen it since. It was a Christmas tree, but it was several different size ashtrays, and the top was a lighter.
Oh my gosh.
And, you know, they had a kiln and everything there, and I remember making this, but I didn't remember that until I saw it sitting in her house at Christmas time.
You were definitely one of the patio girls that smoked, I just know.
Oh, I was.
Because I was too.
Oh, how many were allowed to
My mother
smoke?
never smoked. How many what?
How many were allowed to smoke at the home? If you smoked, were you allowed to?
There'd be smoking in the home.
But there was smoking only outside.
Or in the
I had a
solarium
room that
upstairs.
was 8 by 8.
Yeah, oh.
With 12 of us in there. No ventilation.
How many were overcrowded? Okay.
No, that's when you went
I had a social worker should take us to
Now that we went.
Oh, you should have a social worker that would take them to the movies. Anybody get to go to the movies and
Well, this is
shopping?
the difference between
1980s, yeah.
Not after, we were not allowed to leave after a certain month.
There's a local theater that
Once you start making it.
A local
Wedding rings on your
Oh, how many, now this is a very important part of this whole healing process, how many had a wedding ring to wear while you were at the home? Or purchased one thusly?
Wedding ring when you went out.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. My
1, 2,
mom
3,
and dad
4. Did you?
We're honest. No, we didn't know where that.
Oh, you were too honest. So they say about 6. Okay.
And we had to. We couldn't go out without them on.
This just
7 of us went out one time, and we all had wedding rings on. We were all 7 pregnant teenage girls, and we were.
We couldn't go out.
Hold anybody?
Okay. How many?
I wanted to throw in something about the past and not going out. You were at St. Anne's. What year?
63 and 64.
Okay, because I was at Booth 66, and they're down the street from each other. And we could have passes and go out. Of course, we go out in groups 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, girls pregnant, of course, by the hoots and hollers of the, you know, guys on the street was interesting. We were not allowed to talk to the girls from St. Anne's.
You couldn't leave the premises at St. Anne's unless you were 18. And I turned 18 at St. Anne's, but that was also passed 2 weeks before my delivery date.
Which then is the cutoff again.
And that was the cutoff. You couldn't leave if you were within 2 weeks of your delivery date. So I never got to leave the place.
But we couldn't talk to the St. Anne girls. I mean, now, you're all pregnant, right? What are you going to get from the other person? You know, contaminated or something? And there was another home right up in there, too. Was it Florence Crittenden in L.A. or
Yeah.
was it right around Occidental too?
It's all
like
all 3 are within
walking
a.
distance. I mean, this whole born in East L.A. is what it is. In East L.A. There were more pregnant girls walking around this neighborhood at any given time in the afternoon than you can ever imagine. Trying to be picked up by all this.
How many of you gave birth at the maternity home or at a hospital off the site? I gave birth at St. Joseph's in Phoenix, so I was taken in the lime green station wagon in the middle of the night to St. Joseph's, which is a little, maybe 5-10 minute drive. So I gave birth off-site, off-site birth.
Oh, really?
Oh, that many.
I'm really surprised.
We had a taxi.
Are you counting?
No, I was so surprised.
I had to go in an ambulance, and that was the thing that was just so shocking to me, because I got into the ambulance, and I was terrified anyway, and they strapped me down, and we hit the street, and all of a sudden he turned the siren on. I went, after all this secrecy, you are trained on that siren? I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. And he wouldn't turn it off either.
I'd like to describe the ambulance that was used for the Florence Crittenden home in San Francisco. And it made me, they said the police department had an ambulance, so there I ran at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my roommate went before, nobody mentioned to me. It really, it really was like a paddy wagon. You just had a seat in it. And I felt like I was being treated like a criminal. They told us we couldn't go in the taxi. And to have this black and white little paddy wagon kind of thing.
Oh, God.
That they call an ambulance, and I felt that was the one thing I found. I still remember doing that in the rain at 5 a.m. in the morning, and it had no facility for medical emergency. It would just cart you from the home to the hospital.
It did sound like a paddy wagon.
It was a paddy wagon.
Full hospital at Booth. There was a full, I mean, as far as just delivery. And if you had an emergency, then you went to White Memorial.
Okay, what happened after birth? After, I would say within 6 hours, I was in an ambulance going back to Florence Crittenden. Unless I had had complications, I was, no, the baby was at St. Joseph's in the nursery in the back of the corner. But within hours after birth, you were returned to the home where you were in a room, which I swear seems as big as this, all by myself, because nobody else had delivered. There were 4 beds in the room, and that's where you were doing your post-delivery, health routine. And there was a restroom right across the hall and showers that only the girls who had delivered could use. Or if you were in some sort of pre-crisis or a pre-birth crisis, you would stay down there. Sort of like what they call the infirmary. And they had delivered babies there at one time, and then had decided this probably wasn't a medically sound thing to do, and had opted to use St. Joseph's. Also in this whole experience, I realized that we were also guinea pigs, because the doctors, and I use the term in quotes, were really medical students. and interns and residents at St. Joseph's. And we would have been seen by anywhere from 4 to 6 different doctors during your stay, depending on how long. And of course, there was always, I want him to deliver me, or I want to make sure he's on tonight. And I can remember girls going into the clinic day, which I think was Mondays or Tuesdays, and they would say, well, who's going to be on rotation Thursday night, you know, or whatever, because I'm getting close and I really like him or whatever. So there was that anxiety about who was going to deliver your baby.
I want to know how much preparation everybody had. How many, did you have classes for the birth?
No.
Or,
No. There was,
wasn't happening.
They didn't discuss the pregnancy.
That's right.
You went into labor at booth.
I had that.
You went
Oh,
upstairs.
I remember having this gentleman, Mr. Gray, come in and give us lectures on breathing and, yeah, there was some preparation for birth.
Really?
No preparation, obviously.
Mr. Gray?
No. Mr. Gray, who,
Who was Mrs. Gray?
yeah, really.
She could have probably told us a little better.
And then, you know, so I only know this because there were letters to my mom. I don't remember it a whole lot.
I know, we just had, it's not filtered down from all the girls.
Yes.
And it was only rumor because none of them have been there yet.
Right.
what is it
allowed
to talk?
We had the delivery in there, so it would come down, and well, how did it go? Her labor was really bad, she made a lot of noise, and that was horrible world.
Okay.
You hear the screaming from the labor room.
Here's
About that. Did you actually hear the screaming?
well, not if you were at St. Joseph's. I mean, my God, that'd be some scream. Yeah. Oh, I've heard that they, could definitely hear them.
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B.
Birth control information after.
Not at St. Anne's.
Two? Two? 1980, in 1980s they do. There were 4 of us that were quite close at Florence Crittenden. Of the 4, one was given birth control information as her exit interview.
Exit interview?
Yes. Are you sure you've done the right thing here? Are you sure you're sure? All this crap. And she called me and she said, well, I'm home. I said, yeah. She says, and the first thing they want to know is what kind of birth control I'm going to use. I said, they ask you? And she said, yeah. And they ask you? I said, no. So I checked with our other friend. No, they never said anything to her, never said anything to the other one. So obviously they knew where Patty was going.
Cindy, I know you asked about, before delivery experiences, but you didn't ask about during.
During delivery? No, we haven't got there yet.
Okay.
As I wonder,
I didn't
because
know
I'm
if you were
segueing into some, no, I'm not going to skip over a moment of thrill here.
You want my, Florence Crittenden in San Francisco in 61. They have, the mothers went to the youth in San Francisco and beforehand, and they had some, nursing or some educators who would come in and show film. They showed us one film on delivery. A normal delivery at that time was episiotomy and all, and cell block anesthesia. And they did some stretching exercises, but it, plus they showed a film on, the film that went on childbirth, started with the farmer and his wife, the farmer planting the wife with a seed, and I protested against that because I thought it was offensive. I told them I thought it was very offensive, and they said, well, they thought that we need to be educated about the proper way we should get pregnant.
The proper way. Oh, there's a proper way.
Oh, and there's an improper.
What I wanted to say about the education, they also had counseling sessions once a week, which were group therapy, which was to instill upon us the importance of relinquishing our children. And they used, the leader would always, any girl who was not going to relinquish was discussed as being selfish. A total orientation, there was nothing oriented at that home towards keeping your child. It was totally organized towards relinquishment. And the further thing, prior to being sent to the hospital, they had an old nurse there who was about 80 years old. She was something like an LV, and she was very incompetent, and she was always sending girls there way past the time that they should have gone. My bag of water broke a week before I was sent. And I got to the hospital, they asked me, and I said, and this is how good their education was. I didn't know I was supposed to call the doctor right away. The doctor, as soon as I got into residence, you're what? And then I had to have a forceps rotation.
Oh, God.
But I had been in labor, at least a full 24 hours prior to being sent to the hospital. This was a week after my water broke, and it seems to me it was more than 24 hours. And this old nurse was trying to decide how far the baby had descended. Well, it wasn't descending far because it was in a bad position. And I feel that, and then another friend of mine didn't get sent to her visit, it was already starting to emerge.
Oh, God.
So, and this was going in that cataract. So I think that, beyond asking what, the general experiences are, I think there has statistically been a higher infant mortality and maternal mortality rate with unwed mothers. And it seems to me, given that 90% of, a certain group of unwed mothers, at least white girls, were in maternity homes. I've never seen statistics on maternity home mortality and infant mortality, but I'm sure they're higher than what you would receive if you were in the private physician's care.
Mm-hmm. I agree with
you. I
you.
think that was probably true, in the 60s, in the 50s, 40s, and the further back you go, it's probably higher.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that shall we segue into horror stories or very unpleasant situations?
Share one thing that came to my mind: the films, the education. We had films when you first came in. If you were there during your first week, there was like one day a week there'd be these little films. It was a hygiene film. You had to watch and learn how to bathe our private parts. And I remember I was so insulted by having to be told how to take a bath. I mean, I was 18 years old. I'm sure I'd had at least 18 baths in my life once a year, And that ever since that date in there, I kind of tuned out to any time they wanted to tell us anything. I literally just kind of went in and, you were required to have gone to these things. But I didn't hear them after that because I thought, well, after that very first, it was the second day I was there or something. I tuned out totally to anything they really said. So when they did talk about delivery, I didn't listen. And so then I didn't know. But it was because they get down to such a basic, demeaning kind of thing and think that you're like, little gutter girls or something who never learned how to take a bath. It's, I mean, I just thought, come on, I have standards.
Very demeaning attitude.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other horror stories?
You asked about pre-delivery. At St. Anne's we had the exercise lady, she was called. And she came in once a week. At somewhere, I think it was around 11 in the morning. And we were all in the rec room, 90 of us in the rec room, learning how to go. When someone came in and said President Kennedy had been shot. I think I'll never forget that day.
No.
And what we were doing.
I was getting a 2 Saturday night.
Yeah, we were, all of us descended upon the chapel and spent the day there. But that was, whenever anyone asked what were you doing when President Kennedy was shot, I was learning how to breathe,
In a maternity home.
Yeah. I mean, how do you share that?
I don't have a chapel.
Ours did.
No.
How many had a chapel? Looks like most of, or some area of worship.
We had to go to Mass.
Well, of course you did. You were in a Catholic home.
Every morning, not just Sunday. We had to go every morning at 6 o'clock.
If you did not have a chapel or church or some sort of religious
Area.
place there, did you all go to church somewhere on Sunday?
There was access. If you wanted to go, your parents could pick you up.
Your parents? The Salvation Army, you had to go to chapel on Sunday.
My sister was going to beauty school at the time, and she used to drive, we lived in the north end of Seattle, and Florence Crittenden is in the south end, and she used to drive down twice a week to do everybody's hair.
Oh, how nice.
We did our hair down at the beauty shop in the basement. I went in with long hair, and one day the birth father came in to pick me up, and I had a sassoon. I mean, he went, "What the hell happened to your hat?" Wasn't it cute? It's the latest style.
Sure.
Well, we had a beauty shop. We all did everyone else's hair, and that's how I learned how black people did their hair.
We had one
I
in the
didn't know
basement.
that. I didn't know how that happened, how they straightened their hair.
I can remember we had chapel on Wednesdays, and we had a person who was in charge of the chapel, as you two were. And this was, now don't forget, this was a non-religious home. So every week you had someone from a different denomination come in and talk to you about original sin and the wrath of God. My girlfriend was so incensed by this, she says, I'm not going to this again. You can't force me to. I'm 19 years old. Forget it. They said, well, why can't you go? She says, she thought of it. She says, I'm now Jewish. We never had a rabbi. We never had a rabbi.
They offered the birth control too, right?
Oh, no. No, that was bad.
Sounds like her.
No. But what was funny, when you think of all the religious folks that came in, and those of you who are in Idaho, and Ken Perry talked about the religiosity imposed upon all of this stuff and permeating of sin and the shame and the guilt and all this crap, you think, wait a minute, I wasn't even part of that whole shtick, and they were still there shoving it down our throat. And these were men. These weren't females, but there weren't a lot of female in the clergy at that time either. But I thought, boy, they just can't get enough of, let's shove it to her again, let's really make her feel crummy about herself, because when she walks out the door, she'll never look back. She'll be walking, look at the ground the rest of her life. And that's how I think I went through a lot of my post stuff, was not ever looking up or out. I was always looking down, because I was so shamed by the whole thing. And then you get to that point where you either jump off the cliff or get healthy. I'm not sure which happened first. But anyway, yes.
While we're on the discussion of religion and chapel and this sort of thing, for those of you, and this is from a an adopted standpoint, for those of you who are Catholic,
How many are Catholic or were? Well, there are some that are not.
I have been told by people that are assisting me in my search that it was pretty typical that if you were Catholic, you would take your baby, usually accompanied by someone, like from the home or the hospital or someone, and take it to be baptized. Did that happen?
Yes.
How many
Usually
people
on
did
the
that
second
happen?
day. I had heard that at St. Anne's, only if you were Catholic
Only
did
if
you
you were
ever get to
Catholic.
hold your baby.
That
And it
was
was
the
only
only
at that
time.
moment when that was for the baptism.
I had a Catholic roommate, she delivered, after delivery, and she delivered just a few hours before I did. And she took her baby downstairs to the chapel for baptism, and she ended up taking her daughter home.
She was able to? How did she do that, though?
Well, she just, she went in to do it, and she just changed her mind, said no, taking her home.
A lot of the homes, not St. Anne's in California, but I know that they actually had a priest come in and baptize all new Catholic babies, because not all girls were Catholic in Catholic homes, even though the mother wasn't there. I mean, like they felt that it was their responsibility to make sure that this child was baptized. So they went from bassinet to bassinet.
Of course, we had our own priest in residence at St.
If you
Anne's.
are baptized, and you will have a baptismal record,
That's why.
and if they follow through and suit the way they should, that will tie into your later baptismal for your adoption.
I am not Catholic now, however, I'm just really hoping and praying that my birth mother wasn't that Catholic, so that would be another.
It's hard to get those baptismal certificates, but they do exist. Yeah.
The other question that I had is, did everyone here, and then again, I was born, unfortunately, too long ago.
Well, I don't know.
You look fine.
You look great.
No, I was born in 1939.
Oh,
and
that's
so
never.
Yeah.
Just help the woman find her birth mother in Missy right now.
Mm-hmm.
Missy, and she found her. The mother's not real happy with it.
I'm just wondering, did all of you know what the sex of your baby was? Because
How many knew the sex of the baby?
everyone.
Oh, that's right.
Here's another question I think we need to know is, or need an answer to. How many were told, or you somehow found out you could name your baby?
How many named your baby?
But I did anyway.
Good. She wasn't told.
That was one of our activities during the day, by the way. I forgot to mention, was we sat around talking about what we were going to name our babies when we found out we could.
I can remember when that first piece of information came to our little group of 4, and they said, what do you mean you can name your baby? They said, sure, go ahead and do it, because they're going to change it later anyway, so you may as well. But we were never told by a social worker or a nurse or a hospital official that we could name our baby.
No one at St.
Never.
Anne's told us that we could.
Yes.
I'd like to know how many were allowed to choose what religion the
you could request, but it didn't matter that, but it didn't guarantee that that's what would happen. Okay. How many were guaranteed a particular religious affiliation? Okay. Okay.
But I said I didn't care.
That was about the only thing you could request.
That was about the only thing. I added an addendum to that. I said, I don't care what religion, but I want my son raised in a non-prejudiced family. That's how I feel. So it remains to be seen after I get to know him.
A non-redneck. Marilyn?
I just want to say, when I was born in the 30s and 40s in a Catholic home, this is the state of Minnesota, I don't know how it varies, but the ladies were required to nurse for 48 days. 48. My mother nursed me for 48 days.
And then gave
got
you
jobs to replace. My mother went to work for the mayor of St. Paul in his home, and she came, how many times per day?
Wow.
Okay. It wasn't until I read Suzanne Arm's book that I found out about that they stayed 6 weeks to nurse at St. Anne's in the 40s.
I want to move along here. That's true.
And they had big epidemics in the 40s of diarrhea, infant diarrhea, that was pretty fatal.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of infant fatalities in the 40s.
Okay. Let's go, because I'm sure I'm cutting into Carol's time.
Oh no, this is better than. I mean, everybody's got a story. I don't want to. Please don't.
Okay.
I'd rather have everybody talk.
Okay. How many of you have returned in your healing process to see the maternity home, either driven by or actually gone in? All right.
How many's gone in the door? How many's in your room?
Whoa.
Oh, I saw mine, and you know what? The delivery room is now a TV room. And when I told that to the girls that lived there, they said, you gave birth in this room and we watched TV in here?
The room that I was in labor is now a part of the adoption agency at St. Anne's.
St. Anne's was an interesting facility. It's one of the oldest in Southern California. Unfortunately, through my affiliation with the Adoption Reform Movement, I was a member of the California Association of Adoption Agency Committee for the state. And we would have our meetings at St. Anne's because they had the largest facility. So every time I drove up there, I walked through those doors, and I want to tell you, I thought of all the women that have gone through those doors who came out empty-handed. And I thought, how many of these ceilings look so familiar to the adoptees that come back? Because I have had people come back and say, there's something about this room. I had to go in this room. And I realized later in talking to a nun that this is where all the deliveries were. So there was a lot of that in there. Their facility had the agency, which was Holy Family, in one end, and in the same structure was the Unwed Mother's Home. So you just turn left and go over there, and you're all done, and out the door, goodbye. And it was all very concise and very compact, and it was very efficient, and still is to this day. And I'm sure that the father that was there is still there today, because he shuffles around and he's. But anyway, it was a real different experience for me to go to another maternity home. For a while, the Crittenden home in Phoenix had been turned over to the county and was used as a female offender juvenile center, whatever. Yeah. Girls who were really more than pregnant. And now it has gone back to Florence Crittenden Services. So my next trip to Phoenix, when I go to meet my grandson, who was just born last week actually, is to go in. Because I stood outside and I looked at that place, I thought, oh my God. And when I first met my daughter, we went by the home. And it's in the dregs of Phoenix, to be truthful. And she looked, she said, oh my God. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, it wasn't that bad. And she said, oh, it looks like a prison. And of course, my roommate always thought it was anyway because of the barbed wire. I didn't see that high. I just didn't see that. I couldn't look at the barbed wire. Okay, and do you think that the maternity home experience for you was a positive one or a negative one? My reason for asking the question was, when I looked back at this experience, knowing my mother, this was the best place for me to be. And that's what made it not so negative, because we were not treated badly there. There was a lot of humor. We made friends with the nurses, and there were some that looked like they were old as Methuselah, but It was just a different experience, and I didn't feel negative. I really felt that these women in those little nurse uniforms, and there were no pants, there were just nurse dresses. I really felt that they almost wanted to step out and say, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" I just felt there was this, but they could never say it. And how many women, and I suppose we could jump over to the feminist workshop next door, how many women did we encounter through this process, whether it was our mother, a cousin, a nurse, doctor, social worker, adoption agency worker, whatever, counselor, ever stepped out of that traditional role and said, "Isn't there some other way you could do this? Couldn't you?" There wasn't anyone.
And there wasn't anyone. They said it was like teaching credentials.
Oh, you lose your credential. Blackmail.
Oh, well, but they found me a job. I mean,
I'll bet they did.
The guy that ran the program for the kids that were in school, in the home, okay, in their education program, was also the head of the speech therapy department of the Board of Education of Toledo. Wow. So he had a job for me.
Well, bet he did.
It amazed me because I said, why would he, this is the mindset back there, why would he hire a woman, an unwed mother? I was so struck by this wonderful man. I sort of made him a god.
Yeah.
It's still in my mind, he's the most wonderful person in the world because he would hire me. Ooh, And, but, when you're saying about it not being a bad experience, we had nowhere else to go. We could not stay home.
Right.
So, that aspect of it, it was a positive thing because where would we have gone?
That's right.
And everybody else was scared and
lonely
and so you bond in a sense of, but I felt like I was the oldest and I was 21. And there were a lot of 14-year-olds running around as high as they were wide and saying, "I want to keep my baby," and whoever it was the father was the most wonderful person in the world. And I remember feeling so much more mature, but
still pregnant.
Harder than them because I waited until I was 21. However,
I think it's more important that they do their story.
There was a strong bond then, but when you walk away, it's gone.
But how many of you exchanged last names if you had to go revert down to initials? How many of you have ever seen any of those people ever again?
Oh, I like it.
Gutsy, I'll tell you.
I love it.
Found in contact.
I put an ad in the communicator to find. I put in, "Please call me, write me if you were Flossie Pritt."
Good.
This time, because I want to hear from them. I wanted to have a room. Bonnie and I were going to room together when she got out too. She was from Kentucky, and I remember waiting to hear from her, and her mother just
had a fit.
It was like you cannot room with a woman that you'll know who you are then.
Oh, God forbid.
You know who you are.
And God forbid you should pass each other on the street.
Yeah.
I lived with 3 of the gals afterwards, and we're all still friends today.
Judy?
I just like to say, I think the experience in my home was probably a positive one. Everybody was happy and there was a lot of jokes, but I just felt so dirty being with all these people that I just couldn't take it.
That's why you dropped out.
And that's why I dropped out.
Maternity home dropped out.
We had to put that in our things.
Gosh, how many dropped out? No. Well, Judy, you're the first honorary member of that one. Yeah.
I had a girl get kicked out because she set fires.
Ooh.
It was a young black girl. She was like 14 or just turned 15, and she didn't want to be there. And within the first 4 or 5 days when she was there, there'd be like these little fires in like a laundry hamper or whatever. And it was interesting what she used to start fires with was like hand lotion. It was very strange. And my roommate and I got accused of setting the fires because we happened to be walking down the hall and discovered one when this billowing smoke came running, down the hallway and stuff. And it was really weird. And they did ask her to leave. I mean, they did say, "You need help, dear, but this is not the place." But we had a few other girls get kicked out because they would not follow the rules.
If we want to talk about funny stories and threats of being thrown out, which I think is very interesting because you were probably paying, and that's another question I want to ask. My roommate Patty and another friend of hers in the home decided they just had to have a pizza. Well, back in '65, they did deliver pizzas. So Patty and Mary went outside of the building at night, went down the side of the fence, all the way to the back where you left in the station wagon to go to the hospital, and they met the pizza driver there with their money. And as the pizza is being lifted over the fence or slid under, I don't know, I wasn't there. It was post-arrest that I saw her. By the nurse.
Oh, by the maternity home police, yes.
As she and Mary are reaching for the pizza, the flashlight goes on, and Nurse Stone says, "Patricia, Mary, what are you doing?" And she threw the pizza away, and she wouldn't let them have it. And they were on report for the next day. They had to go see the director, and they threatened to throw these girls out on the street. Well, shit, you're paying $165 a month. What are you going to do for excitement? I mean, these girls wanted a pizza, and God knows you could never have pizza because of the salt and the cheese, right? You'd have, you know. So, yes, but they were going to throw Patty out, and they were going to throw Mary out. Mary was, third-year college student. Patty was first-year college. Where are we going to go? What worse thing could you do to us? We're already here. I mean, Patty was there within 30 days after conception, and stayed the entire, and 3 of us left her there. She said, "I know you guys are going to deliver and leave before I will, and it's not fair." I said, "No, Patty, I'll wait, it's okay." Well, sure enough, myself, Joanne, and Louise all delivered within 3 weeks and left Patty there till February. Poor Patty.
She delivered to me after I delivered.
Patty got the birth control. Very good. There's going to be a question of who do you think of my roommates got the birth control? It was Patty. Yes. But she informs me today she's never having sex again, so I can now call Florence Critton and tell them that they did their job 25 years later. Okay. Are you, well, I guess Curry already asked us, how many are you still friends with today? I know where all 3 of my roommates are, and I actually know where a 5th woman is. One is in Los Angeles, one is in San Diego, I'm in Orange County, one is in Scotland, and the other one is in New Jersey. And 3 of us were 4 of us were so close that we were in each other's weddings. Wow. And it was really a bond that can never, ever be broken. And it's funny how you won't be in touch for, a lot, and then you'll just gravitate back. No, only 2 of us have found. I found my daughter, and then I called Patty. And strange how things work out. Patty and I were very close and had lived together as Curry and her roommates did. And we had gone on our separate ways and done, had marriages and children and whatever. And several years ago, I was watching the 10 o'clock news. And if you know anything about California, we have a medfly and, quarantine and infestation that won't quit. And I turned on the good old local news, and there on the podium at some rally was my roommate Patty talking about the gassing of the masses.
Was it Patty Cricket?
Yes.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
Was how we were going to gas our people to death with this stuff, and this was unsafe, and we had to do that. And I went, oh my God! I went over, I dialed 411, I got her number out of the book, and we were back and have been reconnected for about 7 years. It took me an hour and a half to find her son in Phoenix. He now lives with her and has for 2 years. And it was absolutely probably the most devastating thing I think that happened to both our families was to give our children up to our parents and whatever. There was another thing that came up in our talk last night when Curry and I were putting a lot of this together, was the people that were affected by it. It seemed the bottom line, it was just us. It was just us in a maternity home, all by ourselves. And supposedly, and I don't know how she did it, but not supposedly, there was a woman in the home who gave birth to twins, and I'll never forget her name was Cheryl. And she was tall, and she wore her hair very much like yours. And Cheryl she had a presence about her that was just, you just knew that this young woman had class. She had twins. She called her mother in Casa Grande or Tucson and said, "That's it, I'm not giving them up, come get us." I thought, oh, she had the courage to speak up. Oh my God, and she wasn't any older than I was. And nobody questioned her decision. And I thought, could it have been that easy?
I think, it was funny because I knew 2 gals that did that at the last minute. And we all went,
how could they do it?
it's like nobody said anything. And no one was, all of a sudden went,
no, don't do this.
Yeah. There was a real strength, and I had such admiration for her. I hadn't delivered yet, but I sure had admiration for what she did. I thought, why couldn't I have seen that I did the same thing? And then the family that was further affected by this, I think that my parents were affected by this for the rest of their lives. And I know that my relationship with them suffered because of this. I did not see my parents from the time I left on September 8th, 9th, or whatever of 1965 until I returned home January 8th of 66. I did not see them. And I had to go through a lot of really looking into myself and feelings of control and abandonment issues. I felt that my parents abandoned me. I felt particularly that my father abandoned me. But I didn't want to put a bad connotation on what they did because it was them. Yes, they were supposed to be taking care of me. And I really feel, and I've said this in videos that you might see around the movement, I felt that I stopped being their daughter. At the point I became pregnant and unmarried, my God, and my mother wanted to know how many times. I said, what's it matter, 1 or 500, you know? I mean, let's blow her out of the water anyway.
It was only once, it's an accident.
I
was still a virgin when I got pregnant.
Well, you know, after we did the book, my mother said, I thought Carol only did it once. I mean, after how old am I now, Mom? You know.
Oh, but it was just once, wasn't it, dear?
Didn't you want to know if you had any alcohol or drugs, other things too?
Oh, and an influence to make you do this.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed, yes.
Well, he was an older man, I mean, you know, all of 2 years, I mean, it's that world experience.
I was raped. And the worst thing was standing here and screaming at me, but I wasn't raped.
But
you weren't.
No, I wasn't.
It's such a horrible thing to have to be, you know,
Yeah.
Telling your mother that you had a good time.
I mean, she wasn't happy about that.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Wipe that smile off your face, Judy.
Judy, now quit smiling about that. So I think there were a lot of other
I would love to talk
relationships
about
in that.
this point that you made, though, because people ask me this all the time. Why didn't you change your mind? I mean, here you said that there was what was the difference between us that didn't and just stand up for ourselves and the ones that could?
I don't know.
I don't know yet. I have not got that answer yet.
I think that, because I've talked to this a lot with the woman I work, I work in a residential home for single moms, and of course today, you know, it's very different, but we were talking one day and we were describing our personalities. I think that so many of us during the 60s were such, quote, good kids. We knew, even though my family was supportive, I knew, and they were they were very sad. I didn't know until now that my mom was so sad because I was losing my child. I thought my mom was sad because I was married and I'm pregnant. So you have to make everything right. I'm married. Now, boy, was that a Freudian. But I think there was this thing of let's make everything all right because you did something wrong back then. That was the mindset. You did something wrong. So you have to kind of make everybody okay and everybody all right. And I think that I don't know. Is it a middle class, upper middle class kind of mindset that I was struck by? You know, how wonderful to it seems like some of the lower economic families had it made in a way because it was sort of like they didn't care about what the people next door thought. You know, they had a child and they took that child in. But we were not raised that way.
A lot of the minority groups do
sad.
not ever surrender their kids. And there were 3 black girls at Booth when I was there, and they all felt that they had been ostracized by their family saying, the other black girls get to keep their babies, you know, why can't I? Why? And they didn't go to maternity homes that often. And so those 3 really, of course, one set the fires and got kicked out. You know, she
There's
really,
a whole
you know,
research thing
yeah,
in that.
the minorities and the you know, less advantaged financially, you know, would keep. And so we were all the middle class white girls.
They would be.
Right, and see, we were the ones
Then why do they
houses in the poorest part of town. I want to know that. You know, they build these
They
homes.
hide it from the rest of white society.
I know.
But the area that St. Anne's was and Fort Worth was in that wasn't a poor part of town when they were built.
No, not when they were built. My mother-in-law was born there.
You know,
When she found out I gave birth there, she almost died.
on the other end of that spectrum of, you know, the ones who had heard someone had kept their baby and all that, I went into the home saying I was keeping my kid. I had daily sessions with a social worker about what my rights were, that you don't have any, even though you're 18. Yeah, I mean, you know, the rights of being mother or whatever.
This is the end of tape A. Please continue on to tape B.